a 3-game slate, nice little 3-gamer. I don't know if they can live up to what happened last night, but should be fun games either way. Everything, is supposed to be really, really close tonight. So you have everything bunched up, and it should be a fun one fun way to go. And one thing I wanted to point out last night, that there's some really good plays that you're going to get low ownership on. But at the same time, I looked at the guys who were winning the lottery and everything, and it was kind of surprising to me actually how chalky some of the builds were. It just sort of was interesting. It was a little different construction, and that's sort of what won it for the guy. But just wanted to throw that out there, that I think that there's still value to be found in hidden places. It's just a question of finding the right ones. And I'm going to try not to be so stubborn and have to play somebody at less than 5% ownership. That's something that I want to correct myself. So anyway, just want to throw that out there.
One difference between last night and tonight is just the spacing of the games. You have an hour between the first and the second instead of a half hour.
Mm-hmm.
The rest is pretty much similar. And one thing I am seeing is that I think that just the overwhelming majority of the value is coming from one game. And I guess we should just start with that. I mean, like I currently, when I just ran these projections, I have just so much coming from that Milwaukee, Indiana game that I imagine that a lot of other people are going to get to that same conclusion,
Right.
And then I might even identifying certain players like Beverly at 4,500. I mean, he's going to slip into a bunch of lineups, I think, just because because the pricing's kind of tight. You know what I mean? And then you could get 5,400 from Brook Lopez, maybe, that he might show up a little bit. But I think that's where the majority of the action is going to be, is to play guys from the Milwaukee, Indiana game. I look down here. I mean, yeah, Luka looks good, but I guess Kyrie 8,300. I don't know. I guess we can just go game by game. But that's my initial take, is that the Indiana Milwaukee game is really just dominating the projection board, at least. It's
dominating. Yeah, it is, and it's interesting because we don't know what's going to happen with Kawhi tonight. That's to me the biggest piece, because I actually think that the Clippers, like Terrence Mann was the one who got there the other night. People played more Powell and a little bit of Westbrook. But I would go back to taking some shots on all of that stuff. And Zubac, who's going to project much worse without Kawhi, but was absolutely dominant in game one. So really interesting to try to figure that piece out. And honestly, what they're doing with his projection, I don't, just for what my guess is, if I had to guess whether Kawhi plays tonight or not, I would guess he doesn't. But it's just a guess, just based on history, that they would wait and basically until they lose a game in the series, because they want to make a run anyway. So
pretty amazing. What a terrible job Dallas. I mean, they had a golden opportunity. You know what I mean? Like, to take the home court back with Kawhi out. You know what I mean? They just weren't competitive, right? I mean, like, they just got blown out.
They got blown out until they made a run late, and Luka and Kyrie got really hot late. But it was the Clippers. One thing is, like, they're really deep. They can afford to lose somebody more than most of these teams can. When you've got Westbrook and Powell and all those guys not starting, even, like, they always have to sit somebody who should be starting, and they've got some really talented guys. Anyway, this first game, Phoenix at Minnesota. Cheats, what are your thoughts here?
I mean, it's 2-11.
Yeah.
I guess Beal showing up is okay at 6,400. I mean, Booker, in a vacuum, is cheap at 8,400. But it's tough. I mean, obviously tough. It's always tough matchups in the playoffs. Anthony Edwards, you know what I mean? Like, he 8,900 is relatively cheap, but it's going to be probably a lower scoring game than they're used to. Like, all these guys. I guess Jaden McDaniels is going to be the value that people go to at 4,100. I guess that makes some sense. I actually ran a Saberson build, for example. What am I getting here? Yeah, like 68% Jaden McDaniels. So that's somebody that's going to show up. But again, it's Gobert, I guess. Yeah, though he's the one that's actually showing up for me quite a bit. So Gobert, I'd be getting 80% of, actually, when I run these builds. So McDaniels and Gobert, and almost, I mean, Royce O'Neal is like the first guy I get to from Phoenix, and he's only getting like 20% of that. So what do you think of this game?
Yeah, I still am stuck on this series. I picked Phoenix in 6, but after game 1, I immediately felt like I regretted it. Not even after game 1, just seeing the way that Minnesota played. I don't know what's gonna. I think Minnesota is clearly a better team, but there's those 3 guys from Phoenix. Literally, any of them heat check could go off. So on the Phoenix side, I have Beal actually as a priority play. I think the price is a little too low. And I think that he ends up with Jaden McDaniels is one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA. He'll spend the whole time on Booker or Durant. And I just don't think, I think Beal ends up with the best matchup. They've had the ball in his hands more. You can look at his game log. He's been consistently outproducing it. He didn't have a great first game, but I'm not worried about that. I have Beal as a pretty strong play here. Royce O'Neal, I like the value. He's part of the value that I'm going to be using today. And those are my main pieces here. I think there's an argument you could make for a low-owned Nurkic. It's just not one that if he was like 5,500 maybe, because they don't really have other bigs and you're playing 2 bigs, but they don't really want it. So Phoenix tried to go small. It didn't really work. I'm just curious. There's a way that Nurkic minutes could go up tonight. Just wanted to throw that out there. But as of right now, that's how I've got it ranked. Beal, Booker, and KD on the fringe, and then Royce O'Neal as a good value piece. On the Minnesota side, I think Anthony Edwards is far too cheap for what the actual role is for what he has now. I think that, I know it sounds weird, but I guess everybody's too cheap, but I expect him to be closer to 50 more often than I do for him to be now. I would say, I don't know if I want to make this rule, but I'm definitely considered having Edwards or Cat in every lineup because I really like Cat as a low owned play here. And he can get it going. If it's not going Edwards, if it's not the Edwards direction, it could be the Cat game. He only played 26 minutes in the last one, but was on a really good pace to have a big game. So I think those 2 are really interesting. Gobert, I think is definitely a decent play. I worry about him in general. That again, we've seen this happen his whole career pretty much, and this is why I'll never consider him to be one of the best defenders or the best defender in the league. You can't get played, and they played him in the last game. But if Phoenix goes small and it works, it's going to be hard for Gobert to stay on the court and have much of an impact, even if he does. So that's my one fear for Gobert. But that's how I have it ranked. I have it Edwards, Towns, then Gobert, with the note that I like the Jaden McDaniels value, and he's probably the one I end up using the most here, along with Royce O'Neal. But definitely, I think this game could be an interesting game to target just because the pricing it's very, let's just say it's reasonable. If you're not playing Jaden McDaniels, and by the way, Jaden McDaniels is going to frustrate everybody. He might play 30 minutes and have 10 fantasy points. He's there to play defense, not really do much else. So you might want to maybe take a little bit of more of a gamble on Naz Reid, who has certainly a much higher ceiling, but obviously a lower floor.
With respect to using Saberson for a slate like this, I wouldn't make too many flat out rules. It's only a 3-game slate. I mean, if you're getting 5 from one team, I probably wouldn't do that. But because you might get 5 from one team. That's just the way it goes sometimes with Saberson. And I'm just trying to think of what other rules I would make. If I got 2 centers from the same team, would I keep that? If it was a 2-game slate, I would have no problem with it. 3-game slate, I'm not sure what I would do with it. But anyway, yeah, McDaniels, Gobert. I mean, you see the exposures I would have right now. But again, you gotta see the updated projections and remember with Kawhi's whatever his news comes in, it's going to filter down to every other projection on the slate pretty much. It's not going to really change everybody's projection, but it's going to change how they're what percent optimal they would be. You know what I mean? So we are waiting for. Well, you think we get that news? Who knows?
No.
Yeah, right. There you go. Terrific, right? So that I'm with you. I mean, there are pieces here, but I still think that I end up getting more of this Indiana Milwaukee.
Yeah. Just for what it's worth, the Clippers are being a 1-point underdog after winning easily with Kawhi as a question mark makes me think Kawhi is not playing. So it makes me think at least Vegas thinks he's not playing.
One thing they always do, though, they always adjust to the team that needs to win.
The second game, right?
Yeah.
But the Mavs were favored in the first game too. But
I'm just saying in general, though. You know, they always the spread always kind of gives a little bump to the team that needs to win.
Absolutely right. Yeah, you're right. But I just think that the Kawhi thing could have something to do with it. But I think if he was playing, I think the spread would shift a couple points. All right. So what do we do with Indy coming off of just a terrible performance outside of Pascal Siakam, who is obviously clearly a like cash game play. You're playing in most places here. I think Halliburton's going to be lower owned than the projections have him. He's been not the same guy since the injury. I think you're going to hear a lot of things about how he came back because he wanted to make all the teams. It's something to consider. I don't know if I can pull the trigger, to be honest with you today. Something's off, and their offense is running a lot more through Siakam, to be honest with you. So I'm not as into that. I think Miles Turner is an interesting play at 6,400. I think Aaron Nesmith is going to play the minutes, but can be very frustrating to try and get production from. And then I think Obi Toppin as a potential value is probably, you don't get that many 3K guys that could easily play themselves into more minutes. Only played 13 in the last game, didn't shoot the ball well, missed all of his threes, I believe. And I could see him playing more. Of all the Indy possibilities, all of the weird part is Obi Toppin is on like every one of their best lineups for the season. So I have a feeling he'll end up playing more at some point during the playoffs, and I don't know if that's going to be tonight. But I don't mind that. I like to take a shot on that 3,400 price tag of Obi Toppin. But right now, Siakam is the priority. I am just going to go out and say that I don't care what happened with Damian Lillard in the second half. I'm just going to keep playing Lillard, and I'll keep playing Portis, and I'll keep playing some Middleton. I'm going to have probably two of those guys in a good portion of my lineups. And then you get Beverly with the value. So there's a lot to like here on this side. And then the question is, do you want to do the Brook Lopez thing? The matchup doesn't really suit him, but they're playing at home and they can sort of dictate some of the matchup. So I have it Lillard, then Portis, and then Beverly in terms of the guys I'm going to play the most, then Middleton, then Lopez. If you wanted to take a gamble, Malik Beasley and Pat Connaughton are the other two that you're going to look out for. I would lean Beasley, but have no issue if you wanted to go Connaughton. So there's a lot of potential value. I don't know how much, some of it's going to completely disappear. Jay Crowder might end up getting those minutes instead. But I think that, Beverly, I feel comfortable with the minutes. I feel comfortable with Lillard. I feel comfortable with Portis. Middleton looked awesome, but I still prefer the other guys a little bit more. And then Lopez. This is the game I think you're getting most of your plays from, at least as of right now. The difference is what happens if Kawhi is out? How does that change the builds? And I think that's an interesting thing to touch on in this last game.
So I think for the Milwaukee side, as you might have seen, I'm getting a ton of Patrick Beverly, and I have to decide whether that's what I want to do. I'd be getting anywhere between 70% and I won't know if I get 100, but I get a bunch of it just because of his projection, and then it's only 4,500. What else can I say? And the other guys you mentioned certainly all make sense, like Portis and Lillard and Middleton. The one guy that I would mention, and by the way, I'm going to talk about Indiana now. Like Siakam, I definitely think a great play. I didn't think the Obi Toppin play. I think that's a pretty cool way to go. He's not going to project all that well. No, I don't think he's going to get a lot of ownership. And again, if the game script plays the way it could for him, I think you'll be happy that you played him at that price. Let's put it that way. Right. The other one that I'm always a sucker for, the only one you didn't mention was TJ McConnell. So when he gets going, he can, he could put up 40 fantasy points, if he gets it going. And they'll leave him in the game more if he gets it going, and he puts himself in a position to get it going. He doesn't always work out, but I think on a 2-3 game slate, I would definitely like to play him. Mm-hmm. So though the game is going to get like a whole bunch of action. I'll have 3-4s. I'll have all kinds of game stacks in this game, and unfortunately, that's probably what a lot of people are going to do. Mm-hmm. So maybe forcing in some of the Obi Toppin or something like that, or maybe the other one you mentioned, the kind of the hoodoo play from Milwaukee, the Malik Beasley, maybe something like that makes some sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it does. And I think it's interesting that I'm going to be overweight this last game for sure, because that's just where people are not going to go. What do you like here, if anything?
Well, I like Luka, and I'm getting to him. I'm getting like 40% of him. Like with the values that I had mentioned, like the McDanielses and the Beverleys, and boy, God forbid you play Toppin. For example, I mean, you could really slide Luka in like really, really easily. So I like that. And guys, I'm getting now again. Listen, guys, it depends on Kawhi, whatever. But Terrence Mann at 4,100, again, more value. I'm getting a good 25% of him. Go right back to Zubac again, 5,800. Oh, here's one. So he's a center and Lively's a center. Maybe I wouldn't play the two of them together. And I get some PJ Washington, I suppose. But yeah, I think you can play Luka, and then you're just kind of, that's pretty much all. I think that's pretty much all I'm playing from Dallas. I don't think I'm going to do the Lively. Oh, so I was saying Zubac. No, Zubac Lively not on the same team. Sorry. So I don't know if I play Lively, but I think Luka is the only guy I really get to on Dallas, and the guys I mentioned, the Clippers, Mann, Zubac, and we have to see what happens with Kawhi.
Yeah, so I actually think Dallas is kind of interesting. Like the 11-9 for Luka obviously feels like, okay, well, I mean, he's going to score somewhere between, like he had about as bad a game as he could have had in the last game. He put up 61 fantasy points, He can't do much less than he did in that one. Literally, it's like almost impossible. So he and Kyrie as low-owned options are both interesting. I like the Luka side of it. I think what's interesting to me about this, the problem is the minutes don't necessarily equal anything. But Maxi Kleber was the guy where they played during the comeback run, and I think is a guy they're going to look to more in this series. It's a really unfortunate thing what happened. I mean, it's first of all, Lively's 20 years old. It's his first playoffs, and then his mom passed away right before the playoffs. Like, I don't know exactly where his head's at, and I'm wondering if those minutes are going to get whittled away from him. At the same time, at 3,800, he's the kind of guy who could break it for you from a DFS perspective. I've also heard a lot of things about Josh Green getting a lot more minutes tonight and Dante Exum. I don't know how that's all possible, but I know that Dallas wants to make some things, and I'm just throwing out what I've heard from speculation stuff. I'm not playing those guys right now, but I just don't be surprised if you see a few more minutes from them, because they really didn't like the way that they looked with the Hardaway stuff and some of the other lineups they had. So Dallas is still a big question mark for me, and that really is gonna, I'm gonna play the Kawhis out. If you get an angle to take in the playoffs and you don't have news yet, if we don't have news, I'm going to take the angle of playing one of Harden or Paul George in all my lineups, and I just think that's it. As simple as that. I don't really have to think about it. I think that they're both tremendous plays. One of them will inevitably get there without Kawhi. I actually like Paul George better in this game than I did last time it was the Harden game. I like Paul George better, and I'm going to go further. I'm going to play a low-owned Russell Westbrook, who may not end up being low-owned. I'll play a low-owned Norman Powell, and I'll play, regardless of whether Kawhi plays or not, 4,100 Terrence Mann. I think that's the other value piece you look at. Because you have Mann, McDaniels, and Royce O'Neal, who sort of make all the builds of spending up work. Those 4K-ish guys are the natural way I think you should be building, where you're trying to, use some of that value. I love... Like, Zubac was awesome. I mean, the thing that I'm wondering is, like, I do think it highly relates to Kawhi, but it's interesting because you look at these games that he had down the stretch and you look at his projection, and pretending that Kawhi was out, even when we knew Kawhi was out in the last game, he was projected for like 27 fantasy points. This guy's been like around 35 to 45 every game, basically, while Kawhi's been gone. And I don't see any reason why to stop playing him, especially at 5,800. So I like the Zubac. I am going to, again, like I said, pretend that Kawhi is not going to play. And I think it gives you a little bit of an edge in doing so. That's sort of where I'm at. And, look, a lot of plays I mentioned that I like on this slate, guys who I consider to be some priorities: Lillard, Siakam, one of Harden or Paul George, Pat Beverly, along with the McDaniels, Mann, O'Neal. At least two of those guys range at 4,100. I think that's an interesting way to go. So that's what I've got tonight. For what it's worth in the games, my instincts tell me that the Clippers should not be an underdog in this game, even though the natural thing, I'm going to take the Clippers, even though I picked Dallas in 7 of the 4th series. I love watching this Clipper team. I really enjoy it. So it's weird because I'm a Laker fan. I do think Indiana bounces back and gives the Bucks all they can handle, if not win that game. And I like the Phoenix side a little bit in Minnesota. So I guess I'm going against the grain with the two road teams because no road team has won a game yet in the playoffs.
But two of them covered yesterday.
That's true.
The other thing is that one thing you could do if you didn't have it in you to play stuff like Obi Toppin or Beasley, whatever, their showdown slates all night long, so you could play them in showdown. And
That's true.
From what I've seen, by the way, I think zeros have taken down showdown slates last couple of times.
There has been some interesting ones, and there was I want to get more in on the showdown. I think I'm going to do that tonight a little bit, Sheets. I like that idea. All right.
I'm gonna run. I'm out. I could be there for a little bit, maybe only 15 minutes.
If you can, great. If not, I'll just jump on and do it.
Okay. All right, sounds good.